Jim, Vinyl Designs. I wanted to go into some one-hit wonders that I remember from being a kid, being, I guess, between about 10 and 13 or so, 14. I remember all these songs, and some of them were kind of a bigger part of my growing up, and some were less so, and I found interesting as I got older, or I found the stories behind them as I got older. But I'll go into a few of them and tell you what I mean. The first one is a band called Elton Metello. Elton Metello is a band, not a person. I'll play you a brief bit of it. I'll play you the intro here. You probably recognized the beginning of the song because the same backing track, the same music, the entire music track was used for another song a few months later called Saplon pour moi. I'll go into that one in a minute. The Elton Metello version, Jet Boy, Jet Girl, is sung in English, and the lyrics are pretty explicit, and so it didn't get a lot of radio play. In fact, 10 years later even, it ended up in a lawsuit in the States, and a radio station got sued for playing it because it was considered obscene. The FCC agreed. They got fined 10 grand, which is crazy, but that was the 80s. Yeah, just take a listen to some of the lyrics. I'll play you another little clip here, and you'll see what I mean.
And though I'm only just 15, I like to kick, I like to scream. And even if I have a kick or two in bed, when I'm with him, it's just a dream. Ooh, 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 ooh. He gives me head. Jet boy, jet girl, gonna take you around the world. I'm gonna make and penetrate. I'm gonna make you be a girl. Ooh, 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 ooh. Jet boy, jet girl.
So yeah. Okay, so that's the Elton Metello version. It's had a little bit of a comeback. It's had a bunch of people cover it over the years. Captain Sensible covered it. The Damned themselves covered it as well. Some other bands have covered it, but most people know Saplon pour moi. A little side note, when I was in high school, I remember hearing the Elton Metello version and thinking that it was an English translation of Saplon pour moi, which I knew pretty well. Didn't speak French, didn't have any idea what the lyrics were about. And I remember thinking in my stupid little high school brain that I should like the French version better because it's the cooler version, and I shouldn't like the English version. You know how your brain works when you're that age, and you think you're cool and into music. But years later, when I really listened to the Elton Metello version, I realized, wow, that's a pretty ballsy song. Yeah, there's that. Anyways, so the Saplon pour moi has its own story that... So everybody thinks of Saplon pour moi as a song by Plastic Bertrand. It turns out that Plastic Bertrand was the how should I say? He was the face of the song. But he actually had nothing to do with the song. The song was written and performed by, well, it wasn't written by, but it was I think the music was written by and performed by Lou Deprick. But I guess he just, he just didn't want to be the face of the song. And so they found this guy who had a lot of energy, had the right look, and so they made him into Plastic Bertrand, and the song became a huge hit. They weren't expecting that; they just thought it would be like an overnight thing and wouldn't be much of anything. But it was massive, and he put out a number of records over the years. Turns out many years later that Plastic Bertrand, whose name escapes me, Roger Jouret. So Jouret didn't actually sing not only on Saplon pour Moi, but on any of the first 4 records. Never sang anything. Performed as Plastic Bertrand. To this day, I'm not really sure whether the performances were all lip-synced or whether he performed live and just sang himself. I'm not sure, but he did perform a lot. And he, for Saplon pour Moi at least, he got like a ridiculously paltry royalty, like 0.5%. And ended up like 30 years later suing Lou Deprick to get the rights to this song, to get a higher royalty at least. Which is ironic because it turns out he didn't actually sing the song. So, and he won that lawsuit. He won the lawsuit that gave him higher royalties for the song, which is crazy. And then it turns out that there was another court case that happened a few years later, about 10 years ago, that proved that that Jouret didn't sing and that it was actually Lou Deprick who was singing. And finally, Jouret admitted it, and so now everybody kind of knows what happened. But it's crazy. It was just like this, back and forth for years. A guy who was credited but didn't really do it, and then finally went so far down that rabbit hole that he claimed that he did it and sued and won. Anyways, interesting song. Great history behind that song.
Bam bam, mon ça se passe, j'ai sur mon lit à bouffer sa langue en buvant, prends mon whisky quant à moi, peu dormi, vie débris, mais j'ai dû dormir dans la gouttière où j'ai eu un flash. En 4 couleurs.
So the next song I want to talk about doesn't have quite the story behind it, but a little bit of a story, and that's the Vapors, Turning Japanese. These guys definitely are almost the quintessential one-hit wonder. They were a band, or English band. This is 79. They were discovered, I believe, by somebody in the Jam, if I remember right, and put out a couple singles. The Turning Japanese was their second single. Blew up. Everybody knows that song. They had a few other singles on the record that were pretty good. I remember, what was it? News at 10 and Prisoners were both singles. And I really liked News at 10. I had this record in high school and liked News at 10 a lot. Prisoners was fun too. But the record's really hit and miss. There's definitely definitely a lot of flat tracks. But they only made 2 records. This was their first, and then they kind of disbanded. They had the typical story when a band falls apart. I hear this a lot. It's sort of like politicians saying it's time to spend more time with my family. Bands say the label didn't support us, which may be true, but it seems like such a pat and trite thing to say that the label didn't support you. The label generally supports you when you have really strong music, and so there's that.
There's someone banging on my wall. I turn the volume up to full. I don't know who it is or why they don't like me. I don't feel safe in this street. There's something nagging in my head.
This brings me to another person who a lot of people in the VC will know very well, but that's Gary Newman. But if you ask anybody who doesn't really listen to music a lot or who doesn't know this period in music, if they know anything at all about Gary Newman, then they'll know, oh, he's the guy that did Cars, so they'll know that song, and that's it, and that's all they'll know. But Newman has been consistent and prolific. I mean, starting with Two Boy Army, his first band, well, technically his only band, Two Boy Army. When he became Gary Newman instead of Two Boy Army, it was still the same band. He just changed the name from from Two Boy Army to Gary Newman. But always put out great music. He's a phenomenal performer. I've seen him a few times live. Just great stuff, and incredibly influential on so many different electronic bands, so many dance bands. He just, has this way of singing that you either love or you hate. This kind of I don't know. There's a nasal quality to it, and there's an affected quality to it. But for some reason, it's just really cool and engaging and interesting, and I always loved his music and his the structure, and the guy can write great hooks and great pop songs. Down in the Park, Our Friends Electric, Cars. It just there were so many good songs around this era, and he's continued to make great music since then, and has done a lot of interesting things in the last 20 years even. So if you think of Gary Newman as just the Cars guy, then take a listen to more than just that, because there's some really cool stuff.
We're in the building where they make us grow out of rights and by the liquid engineers like you.
So this next one, I would actually call Kim Wilde kind of a two-hit wonder, at least in the States. I know that in the UK and Europe, she was, and maybe still is, much, much bigger. I know she had a lot more hits there. But here, people know her for Kids in America, and I can't remember the other song she did, but she covered a Motown song in the late 80s, and I can't remember which one it was. But it was a big hit. But if anybody remembers Kim Wilde, they remember Kids in America. And this record was just such a big part of my, like, I think freshman year in high school, 8th grade, freshman year, somewhere around there. And really fun record, just perfect sort of pop, you know, sort of punky pop music, lots of energy, just good stuff. And she went on to actually make a lot of great music, and worth listening to.
You say everything's alright. I say nothing ain't alright. Yeah. Oh, they get me away. Sad days add to confusion. Sad ways end in delusion. Hey, well, that's the name of the game.
So, this next song is a song that was a true one-hit wonder. Hit is a big word for it because it was a small hit, but it's what they're known for, and that's 44 Lines About 88 Women by the Nails. This is the original version of it. This is a single, an EP, I guess, called Hotel for Women. And this song was interesting because it was kind of just done on a lark. They had a little, I'm not sure exactly what they recorded it on, but it was like a little Casio that they were just playing around with. And they did this total lo-fi, wrote the song in 2 hours, kind of, simple, kind of on a lark thing. And they weren't going to put it on the single that they recorded because it sounded nothing like the other tracks. And they ended up kind of forcing it onto the single. The producer, I think, didn't want to put it on there, and the band did, or vice versa. I can't remember which. But the gist of it is that it really doesn't sound anything like the other tracks. The other tracks seem fairly polished, and honestly, they're not as interesting. I really prefer the lo-fi vibe of this version. This came out in '81, I believe, and then their studio album didn't come out for years afterwards, and I think this is either '84 or maybe even '85 that the studio album came out, or that the full album came out. I shouldn't say the studio album. The full album came out, and they re-recorded 44 line or 80, yeah, 88 lines about 44 women. They re-recorded it for this version, and I never liked it as much. I heard the original version when it came out, and grabbed this EP. And I remember when the record came out years later, I thought it was a little more polished and a little less interesting. I remember that at the time, but I bought the record anyways because I thought it would be a good record. The record's okay. I wish the Nails had been a little bit more willing to kind of embrace the lo-fi end of things, which probably at the time was not a thing for a band like that. But I think they would have caught on a little bit better. I think that would have, in my mind, that's what set them apart. So, but they didn't end up producing much more after that. I think they broke up not too long after that. I think they struggled with their label. They may have recorded another record that sat in the can for years, if I remember right. Didn't come out for till the 90s or something. I have vague memories of that. But they, yeah, that was kind of the end of it for them.
Deborah was a Catholic girl, she held out to the bitter end. Carla was a different type, she's the one who put it in. Mary was a black girl, I was afraid of a girl like that. Susan painted pictures sitting down like the Buddha sat. Reno was an aimless girl of geographic memory. Kathy was a Jesus freak, she liked that kind of misery. Vicky had this special way of turning sex into a song. Kamala, who couldn't sing, kept the beat, kept it strong.
And that's it for this. So one hit wonders, quick and simple, and I've got a few more that I'll probably bring up for another one of these at some point. But just sort of fun trivia about different songs and songs that are fun. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.